I'm Aditya here and welcome to Softech. In this session, I'm going to discuss with you all about the basics of SAP Material Management. So this session is all about material management overview from the SAP's perspective. If you are new to SAP, I'd recommend you to go through the SAP overview session. I'm providing you this link of SAP overview session in the chat box and in the description as well, and you can go through that and have a basic overview of SAP and then come back to this SAP Material Management. Okay, so I'm starting from the point of SAP Material Management in this session. Now, what is material management? So from SAP's perspective, if we talk from the SAP's perspective, it's a module that manages certain functionalities related to logistics in our organization. So SAP MM Materials Management covers the planning and procurement of raw materials. And when I say materials, it includes the products as well as the services. So in general, it's been taken for granted that it's called materials, but it comprises of products and services in it. So whenever I'm saying materials management, it also manages the services as well and all other items required to run business. It also involves the warehousing of materials. Warehousing means storing of the materials. There would be a premise in the organization, a location where we are going to store all the materials. Materials again will be raw materials as well as the finished goods as well. So that comes into the warehousing and inventory activities like goods inward. Whenever the raw materials come into the organization, that's called goods inward. Issue of goods, that would be the delivery of goods, which will be the finished products would be going out of the organization. That happens to be the goods issue. And also valuating of available stock. Material management plays a very important role in integrating activities in procurement. The meaning of procurement is getting the raw materials or whatever is needed for our organization to build the products or services is called procurement. So we are procuring something, means we are acquiring something in from outside the organization or outside the enterprise. Inventory and goods movements. So if you're moving goods from one place to another place, like for example, we have raw materials which are stored in the warehouse, which in the future have to be moved to the manufacturing plant. So that happens to be the goods movement. Material management also integrates procurement, inventory, and goods movement with other core departments like sales and distribution, finance and production. So these sales and distribution, finance and production are again different modules, and material management is closely integrated with these modules. And if we talk from the SAP's terminology, they're called modules. But if we talk from the outside SAP's perspective, from the organization's perspective, they're called departments. So MM is integrated with all these departments. MM is much more than the procurement and purchasing. It's got a lot of features in it, and we're going to see what are the things that we are going to have in material management. Now the components in the material management, we have MRP, the material requirement planning, is the first phase in the procurement. So this is a procurement cycle we are discussing here, and the procurement starts with the requirement which is triggered by the MRP, the material requirement planning. Requirement can be dependent requirement, for example, the sales order related requirement or production order related department requirement, or independent requirement, for example, a stationary requirement. So we need to first identify the vendor. So for certain requisitions, it is essential to identify a correct vendor. And Once we do this, this could be a situation when a material is produced for the first time. In such scenarios, there is a need to create RFQ, that's request for quotation, and send it to the vendors. Compare the prices quoted by the vendors and select the vendor and issue the PO to the vendor. I stress upon that word that I just now said. If at all, if this is a first time order, then we have to first finalize the vendor, select the vendor to which we are actually triggering this request for quotation, and then we have to finalize the vendor and we have to send a purchase order to the vendor. If at all, if it's an existing vendor, all that we have to do is we have to go for the request for quotation, and then we have to, sometimes we don't even send the request for quotation, we directly issue the PO to the existing vendors and we expect the delivery. So procurement just in not involves procuring of materials. The first step would be the identifying the vendors, and then we have the procurement. So vendor evaluation happens only one time. It's not something which we do on a daily basis. Once we finalize the vendors, we keep them aside. We have a list of vendors who provide us the raw materials or services. So we have a list of it, and if we don't have it, we then go for the vendor evaluation. So in general, what I would like to repeat is that vendor evaluation is a one-time process, not on a regular basis. Then we have the identifying the vendor, and that's what we have identified a vendor, and then we create a procurement order. And procurement, as I told you, just not involves procuring of materials. When a requirement triggers, right from creation of requisition to sending the purchase order to the vendor is taken care by the procurement. Now this involves creation of requisition, approval of requisition, creation of request for quotation if needed. As I told you, it might not be needed for a regular vendor. Only for one-time vendors or the first-time vendors will need the RFQ. Converting of requisition to purchase order, identifying medium to send PO to vendor, and purchase order monitoring. Inventory management. It involves placing of material at right location and also valuate the stock in hand. So this all is inventory management. It is very important to place the material in right place according to the behavior of the stock. A fast moving stock or slow moving stock, is it an explosive item, extra, have to be taken care in the inventory management, and also to keep the track of the same. Then we have the last and the most important is the goods movement. It involves good receipt and goods issue of materials. So we basically acknowledge the receiving of goods to the vendors, and then we also acknowledge the good receipt, wherein they send us the invoice and we take it as a goods receipt. So goods receipt can be for goods received from vendor, production department, or from other manufacturing plants. Goods issue can be against a sales order. It can a goods issue can be against a production order. Goods issue can be against a cost center as well. So I'm going to tell these steps, tell all these terminologies step by step, and especially when you start doing all these things on the system, when you start configuring all these systems, things gets more easier, because when you start working on it automatically, you tend to remember all these things. Now, both good receipt and goods issue affect the inventory in terms of quantity and value. So vendor evaluation, as we already know, it involves evaluating the performance of vendors at a regular interval. Valuation can be on various parameters like delivery time, quality of material supplied, and the value of it, and all these things are taken care by for the vendor evaluation. So vendor evaluation can be a regular process as well. Now, when we focus on the material management functions, as we discussed, we have the MRP, and then we have the procurement, we have inventory, we have goods movement, and we have the vendor management. So when we talk in detail about MRP, the material requirement planning, it's based on dependent requirements, based on sales and production, or it can also be, as we discussed, it can also be on a regular general requirement. So, and then we have independent requirements like based on the past consumption, safety stocks, etc. That would be the MRP concept. So MRP is generated when we have dependent requirements or independent requirements. Now, the procurement involves identifying the vendor through bid or quotation and enter of contract with the vendor for regular purchase, creation of purchase order, sending it to the vendor, tracking of purchase order. Now, inventory management helps us to place the stock in the right location and also to trace them easily, validate the available stock, physical inventory of stock, and the visibility of stock to the departments where it is required. Goods movement involves goods issue, for example, issue to the customer, issue to the production, issue against cost center, etc. And we have goods receipt, for example, receipt from the vendor against the purchase order, receipt from the other plants, etc. And vendor management, we have maintaining track of suppliers, analyzing vendor performance on delivery, price, quality, etc. Now, the material management functions are dependent requirements are normally considered for materials which are high value or which has a short shelf life, whereas independent requirements are considered for materials which are of low cost, fast moving items. Okay, let me give you a very simple example for this. Let's suppose that we have a automobile manufacturing company, and in an automobile manufacturing company, if we have very fast moving items like we have something like tires or steerings or chassis, so these are all something which we are fast moving items, which happens to be a normal way of doing it. But let's say we have a very short shelf life items, like for example the cleaning items, or maybe something which is a perishable item which we are sending, or maybe we can take the say beverages for the employees which we take, might be something which have a very short shelf life. So this comes under the short shelf life products. So whenever there are low cost, fast moving items, we go for the independent requirements. If it's of high value or short shelf life, then we'll go for dependent requirements. So high value is, for example, we have very delicate items like mirrors. So that can be considered as a high value, or of a short shelf, like as I discussed, like any food items. For regular consumed items, blanket purchase orders or contracts can be used, against which materials or services can be procured as and when required. So I suggest you to keep a pen and paper aside you, or then you can make a note of all the important things. So here I would request you to note down the blanket POs concept, blanket POs or contracts. So we're going to discuss about what exactly are blanket POs when we have the regular sessions. We are going to discuss that. So, and then the services or material can be procured as and when it is required. So inventory management involves placing of materials in right place and also tracking the availability of stock. This is very important for smooth flow of business. It also involves physical inventory activities so as to ensure the accurate stock. Inventory management is also responsible for placing monetary value to available stock, as it is also a legal requirement. Goods movement not only involves issues and receipts of material, but also includes data entry documentation of goods movement to and from and within the warehouse used by the company. A regular analysis of vendor performances helps in future decisions making, also in doing the price negotiations with the vendors. Now, what are the challenges? Obviously, for every process that we have, even in our personal life or professional life, we do have challenges, right? And what planning strategy do we need to use? For which all materials do we need to have safety stock? Safety stock in the sense excess stock. So that, like, if there is excess is required, then immediately we go for the safety stock and get it from there. What should be my lead time for planning? So how prior that the planning have to be. For example, if I need a material in April, so how do I plan it? Right? Should I plan it from March, or should I plan it from February, or should I plan it from January? So these things have to be clear. What price do I negotiate with the vendor? Do I procure material against PO, that's a purchase order, a blank PO, that's a blank purchase order, or contract have to be decided. How do I review the vendor performance, and on what parameters do I do the vendor performance? That is also a very important criteria. So how do I place the material in warehouse? Which valuation method do I use to valuate the materials? Which physical inventory method do I use to stock the material stock type? So these are all the challenges that we have from the warehouse perspective. So going forward, our SAP MM solution given by SAP addresses all these challenges, and we have solutions for all these. In fact, more number of challenges are there for which even for which we have solutions in SAP. So let's go ahead and look at it. So the other challenges would be the balance, speed, navigation, and power. So there should be it should be fast. The delivery of the whether it might be the material or the services have to be fast, because today speed matters a lot when we give a service or a product. So in today's market, it's necessary to increase profit by reducing the overhead cost. That's again another important thing. This calls for maintaining minimal inventory and at the same time ensure availability of goods and services on time. Strategies like just in time needs to be adopted to achieve this, which is a challenge in itself. So it is always a challenge to have better bargaining power so as to negotiate a best deal with the vendor, and also keeping in mind the quality of the material or the service that the vendor is providing without compromising on the service or the quality. There is always a challenge to maintain an integrated report and also to analyze such reports so as to improve the procurement process. Decisions like whether to procure materials through PO or to have a contract with the vendor for a specified period of time, depending on its past consumptions, is a challenge in itself. So integrating different processes within materials management and also to integrate with other modules like sales, finance has been a challenge. Now, when we say speed, react to the changing market trends and update the sales forecasts. Navigation, detailed analysis of past purchases help deciding the right channels. Power, based on the estimates, commit volume, purchase and negotiate favorable prices. Balance, just-in-time inventory, ensuring availability of materials with minimum inventory carrying cost. So the efficiency of procurement and inventory control depends on the integrated reporting. Now we have the functions in SAP MM. We are going to first start our functionality or the configuration or the basics of starting with working on SAP MM as a consultant. We'll start with master data and MM organizational structure. We have MRP and other functionalities, very few important functionalities. On this, we have the procurement. After MRP, we have the procurement, and then we have the invoice planning, then we have the inventory and integration. So these are all the important concepts that we have to understand and also configure them in the SAP environment. We have the inventory organization structure. So we're going to first configure the client. Client is something which is like, you can consider that as an organization. A particular organization can be considered as a client. Normally in SAP, a client is a 3-digit number which we're going to configure by default. So when we log in, during the login itself, it'll ask you for the client, and you're going to give a 3-digit number. In some cases, it will be default there on the system. You can observe that in the login page. And then, so here we talk about the client. When we talk about the client, we are referring to the customer or the organization. From there, we configure the company, and company is optional. Under the company, we have the company codes. Company is a conglomerate of multiple companies. So a combination of multiple companies in SAP is called company, and an individual legal entity is called company code. So if I have BMW US and BMW India, so BMW US and BMW India happens to be two different company codes, and they all come under BMW company. BMW is in SAP, BMW is called company, and BMW India or BMW US are called company codes, which happens to be a legal entity. So BMW throughout the world can be a company, but it's not a legal entity. So a legal entity is mandatory. So you have to start your configurations from company code. And even if you don't have a company, nothing to worry. So we have a company code. Under the company code, we have the plant, and under the plant, we have the storage locations. So we're going to configure them in the SAP system. So we at this point of time, we just need to remember that we have company. Under the company, we have company codes. Under the company codes, we have plants. Under the plants, we have the storage locations. Now, purchase organization structure. When we talk about the purchase organization structure, we have company specific purchasing, we have centralized purchasing, and we also have plant specific purchasing. So let's say if I purchase something which is for the entire company, for example, I'm purchasing a gift for all our BMW manufacturing employees, then it's company specific. I'm purchasing something for the company. But if I'm having centralized purchasing, I am purchasing a raw material for a particular a manufacturing unit or two manufacturing units, that's centralized purchasing. And we have plant specific, only for that particular plant we purchase. Like for example, if you have anything related to say fire and safety, you're purchasing some material, so that comes into the plant specific purchasing. So we have one purchase organization is responsible for one company code, and in centralized purchasing, we have one purchase organization is responsible for all company codes, and in plant specific purchasing, one purchase organization is responsible for only one plant code. So we have one purchase organization for one company code, one purchase organization for all company codes here in the centralized, and plant specific, we have one purchase organization for one plant code. So here the client is actually the grouping of all the combination of legal organizational businesses. As I was telling you that BMW is a client. Company code, as I told you, the example is BMW India. So this level represents an independent accounting unit within a client. And each company code has its own balance sheet and its own profit and loss statement. So in short, it is a legal entity. Company code is a legal entity. You need to always remember that and make a note of it. Company code is a legal entity. And it's mandatory for us to start all the configurations from company code. Even if you don't have the client, it's okay, but company code is mandatory. So plant operational unit within a company code. So for example, production facility or a branch office can be considered as a plant. Purchase organization, an organizational unit responsible for procuring materials or services for one or more plants and or negotiating general conditions of purchasing with vendors. The purchasing organization assumes legal responsibility for all external purchase organization transactions. And a purchasing group, The purchasing organization is further subdivided into purchasing groups. So under purchasing organizations, we have purchasing groups like buyer groups, which are responsible for day-to-day buying of the activities. Now, when we talk about an SAP MM consultant's roles and responsibilities, these are all the things that we have to configure, especially if it's an implementation project in SAP. So material master is the first one. Then we have the vendor master. We are going to configure the purchase info record and then the source lists as well. So products and services are combined in SAP ERP system, any of the ERP systems. We have R3, we have ECC, and right now we have the S4HANA system under the term material. All information necessary for the management of a material and its stocks as well as its use is maintained in the material master record. This includes, for example, data on purchasing, on sales and on storage, accounting, etc. And now vendor master is regarded as a company's crediting business partner. All relevant information pertaining to the vendors is stored centrally in a record known as the vendor master record. So purchasing info record maintains for a combination of vendor as well as the material, contains important information like current vendor prices, terms of conditions, standard quantity, etc. So the source list contains the allowed, preferred and or blocked sources of supply for material in a plant that are valid within a certain period. Each source is defined in the source list by a source list record. Now, coming in more in detail about the master data in the procurement process, we have the material master, we have the vendor master, we have the purchasing masters and source list. So the MM functionality, some of the important MM basic functionalities are source determination, quota arrangement, release strategy, split valuation, output determination, and text processing. So when I talk about source determination, we basically identify the most suitable source for a certain requirement from a large volume of data that is available. It suggests outline agreement of our vendor for ordering purpose. So quota arrangement. Quota arrangement requirement is allocated to more than one source of supply depending on the quota defined. Quota arrangement can be used both in in-house and external procurement. The release strategy, this component is used to set up approval procedures for procurement purchasing document. Release strategy can be activated to PO, purchase requisition, contract and scheduling agreement. Split valuation helps to evaluate materials having more than one value. For example, the raw materials procured locally and also imported at two different prices. And then we have the output determination, offers output functions for purchasing, inventory and invoice. So output types are used to represent various forms of output in SAP system. So text processing and a business relationship, it is essential that business partners exchange information throughout the logistics chain. So in material management, this exchange of information is supported by texts in master records and documents. You can maintain these texts for various vendors or material master or define them so that they can be used for more flexibility. Example, the header text, item text maintained in the purchasing document. And a few more are the account assignment category. So we have various categories of account assignment. It determines which account needs to be posted for a purchasing document at the time of goods receipt, whether it is cost center or sales order, project, or few of the account assignment categories. So whenever we are procuring the item, so it comes under one, it falls under any of these categories. So account assignment category happens to be a very important thing. So item category again determines the procurement type. Type of item category are stock transfer order, consignment, third party, service. Item category also impacts the stock type determined at the time of goods received. So whatever we see the alphabets in the brackets is the one we are going to give. If at all, if we have to, if we have decided to give the item category as stock transfer order, we're going to give it as U, type U. And if we are going to give it as service, then we are going to give it as D. So item categories determines whether material number is required, whether an account assignment is required, or whether it is a stock item. Now, when it comes to MRP determination of material requirement, we have the MRP procedures. Under that, we have the consumption-based planning and MRP. Reorder point planning, and then we have the forecast-based planning. We have the time-based phased planning. Manual reorder point, we have automatic reorder point as well. MRP determination of material requirement. So we have MRP procedure is to ensure material availability, that is to procure the requirement quantities for in-house production and for sales on time. And MRP SD receives customers requirement. The sales and distribution receives customer requirement and demand management plans, sales using sales forecast. The result independent requirements triggers the MRP, material requirement planning. And then we have the consumption based planning. So consumption based planning is basically triggered by reorder point planning. That happens to have manual reorder point or automatic reorder point. And we have forecast based planning. Historical data is used in the material forecast, and time phased planning. So historical data is used in the material forecast to estimate the future requirements. Now in the purchasing document, we have the purchase requirement and the purchase requisition. And when we are creating a purchase requisition, it is required to have the master data in place. Without master data, you cannot go ahead and create the purchase requisition. We also need a manual in the MRP, and then after the purchase requisition is created, we are going to create the purchase, or we are going to create the request for quotation, outline agreement, and purchase order finally. These are all the documents which are related to purchasing. In purchasing documents, as I told you, like we have the purchase requisition. The purchase requisition is a request or instruction to purchasing to procure a certain quantity of material or services. Request for quotation is an invitation extended to a vendor by a purchasing organization to submit a quotation for the supply of materials or performance of services. Purchase order is a formal request to a vendor to supply certain goods or services under stated conditions. PO can be created with reference to with reference or without reference to a PR, quotation, or another PO. The outline agreement. An outline agreement is a long-term agreement between a purchase organization and a vendor regarding the supply of materials or the performance of services for a certain period or price according to predefined terms. An outline agreement can be contract or a scheduled agreement. Now we have something called invoice verification. Invoice verification is process to book liability or raise a debit or credit note against vendor for the goods and service rendered. Invoice verification passes invoice information to finance department. Invoice verification is posted with reference to a PO, goods receipt, or bill of lading. And the ways of posting the invoice are like, you can have the invoice being posted through ERS, EDI, or manual entry, invoice plan, or through consignment. So these all might be a reason for generating or creating an invoice. Now then we have the inventory management, when we are going to discuss about the stock type, goods receipts, reservation and goods issues, stock transfer and transfer postings, managing special stock, and physical inventory. So inventory basically deals with managing stock on quantity and value basis. Then we have the stock types, different types of stock types. We have unrestricted stock, we have quality inspection stock, we have block stock, consignment stock, and other different stocks. So in general, going forward with the training part, we're going to discuss about all these different types of stocks in detail. Now again, we have the goods receipt, reservation and goods issue, and stock transfer or transfer postings, managing special stock, and physical inventory. These are all part of the inventory management. Then we have the integration. We have the master data integrated with the MRP, procurement, inventory, and invoice. And these all comes under the by SAP MM. That in turn will be integrated with the sales and distribution, and the finance and accounting, and then the finance accounting controlling. So here, if you observe the integration here, SAP MM gets integrated with all these departments and modules. So the SAP MM flow will be something like this. So even in general, material management also has this, but we are talking specifically for SAP. So it also is the same. So we have first the MRP, then we have the purchase requisition, then we have the source determination, wherein we are deciding whether it is a quota, source list, info record, or outline agreement. Then we have the purchasing. In purchasing, we have the request for quotation, purchase organization, we have contract, and we have schedule agreement. Then we have the goods receipt, goods issue, transfer postings, and the physical inventory are the various concepts under the inventory. Then we have the invoice verification. Inside the invoice verification, we have the manual invoice verification, we have the ERS, we have the invoice plan, and then we have the consignment. Now, basically, to create this, we have to have the material master. Then first we have to configure the material master. Then we have to configure the vendor master. And then we have to configure the info record and then source list. And then during the according to the company structure, organizational structure, we call it as organizational structure. In that we have to have the client, and then we have the company code. Under the company code, we are going to configure the purchase organizations. Under the purchase organizations, we are going to configure the plans. Under the plans, we are going to configure the storage locations. So these are the things that we have to do. Material management, organization structure, master data, MM functionality, procurement, invoice verification, inventory management. So this is the organizational structure that we have, which I was talking about. We have a client, and we consider only single company code. Another company code, we have the purchase organizations, and we can also have plants directly under the company code. And we are having some couple of company plants under the company code, and then we have the storage locations under that particular plant. So we're going to configure all these things. Without these configurations, end users cannot create a document. So purchase organization can be assigned to only one company code. So you cannot assign same purchase organization to two company codes. That's what we are doing. And one plant can be assigned to only one company code. Plant can be assigned to multiple purchase organizations. So a single plant can have two purchase organizations or three purchase organizations as well. And plant specific purchase organizations also will be there. So this is how when we open the SPRO transaction in the SAP system, the configuration part in the MM point of view will something look like this. We have to have the assigned plant to company code, and then we have these are all the assignments. So first we have to go for the definition. So we basically first define the company code, and then come to the logistics. In this we have the we'll be creating a company, be creating a plant, and then we are going to create the storage location, and then come to the assignments and assign. We first assign the plant to the company code, then we assign the storage location to the plant. All these things we are going to do. So this is the master data that we are going to create. At the beginning of configuration, we are going to have the text, and then we have the addition EAN, document data, and consumptions as well. So these configurations anyways we are going to do it live on the system. So this is a vendor master. Vendor master, actually we have the general data. From general data, purchase data, and account data, we're going to create the vendor master. So the MM functionality happens to be purchase requisition, quota arrangement, source list, outline agreement for the info record. So quota arrangement in material requirement, we have 60% quota arrangement and 40% quota arrangement. I'm going to discuss about the split quota and different quota arrangements and all. I'm going to discuss about that later. Release strategy. So we have approval process for internal document or external document. There will be an approval process which go ahead after the approval process only we'll be able to create that purchase order. There will be a release strategy. Then we have the split valuation, like for any order we can also go for split valuation. Output determination and master data text. So these are all the things that we are going to discuss in the next session. About the procurement, what is the process for the procurement and all. So preferably it would be more comfortable when we start doing on the system. So definitely if you're joining the sessions, the live sessions, then you can go ahead and do these things. For your patient watching, and if you have not yet subscribed to our channel, please do subscribe at youtube.com/Softech. And if you want to contact us for the trainings, you can contact us at training@gsf.com. And if you're looking for jobs at SAP, then you can contact us at jobs@gsf.com. Thank you. Have a great day. And I'm going to come back soon with another session. But if you would like to have live sessions, you need to contact us for trainings. Thank you. Have a great day.